I will construct a simple collar with lace in it using the You Can Make It pattern enclosed. If your garment has a simple collar, it will be constructed in the same manner but may have a slightly different shape and size as ours. If your garment collar does not contain the option of inserting lace into, you may add it to your garment's collar if you like. Just make sure you have enough lace to go around the complete collar edge. If you're not putting lace into a real collar, do it on your You Can Make It sample collar. Using the pattern enclosed, cut 2 pieces out of scraps approximately 8.5 inches by 5 inches. Don't worry about grain lines with these You Can Make It collar samples. We are not actually going to apply this to a garment, so we don't have to worry about having it on grain. We are just learning the construction technique for collars. Mark the wrong side of these collar pieces. Of course, if you have a print like me, you won't have to do that because it's easy to tell the right side from the wrong side. On the right side of one collar, mark a line 1/2 inch from the outside curved edge. You can use a pencil to get a thin line instead of chalk. I'm using a pen so you can see better. We are going to call this our upper collar and mark it. On the wrong side, UP for upper. If you have a real collar, you should have your interfacing applied to it, using the techniques learned in Level 2. I have attached a piece of interfacing to my sample for demonstration purposes. You don't need to do this to your sample. Go around the complete collar edge and mark in 4/8, which is 1/2 of an inch. At the ends, mark in 5/8 of an inch from each neck edge on each end. When completely marked, this is what your collar should look like.
Stay still.
Take your scrap piece of lace and look at it carefully. Decide which is the wrong side and which is the right side. Place your lace with the right side down and the end folded over, and pin in place on this line starting 5/8 of an inch in from the edge using your markings. I'm using this guide to place my lace. Make sure the lace is inside the curve. Let's check that you've placed it correctly. Here's what I mean. Eventually, we will sew this other collar piece on top and turn. This is the top of my collar, with the right side of the lace showing and sticking out. Try to remember to always double check this lace placement. It is an area we all make mistakes in. Again, lining up your lace on this line that we've marked. Now, when lining up this lace on the 1/2 inch line, take into account that we're going to sew 5/8 of an inch in from the edge, 1/8 inch away from this line. I never like to have to sew 2 times in the exact same spot. I am too far from perfect, and I always like the 1/8 inch room for error. So any lace that is 1/8 inch below this line will show. Adjust your lace on your 1/2 inch line according to taste. Pin this lace completely around the collar's curved edge. Now notice I am placing my pins this way, not across so that I can sew over them. The reason I do this is because I would need too many pins to hold it in place if I were to put my pins the other way. We will have to remove these pins as we sew. So try to remember to put the pin with the point leading in for easy removal during sewing. Trim the other end, fold over, and pin in place using that 5/8 inch marking at the other end. We will then sew this lace in place. Okay, you have your lace completely pinned on. Drop a contrast color bobbin in your machine and very slowly sew at 1/2 inch seam allowances. Sew this lace in place and don't forget to remove these pins before you get to them, 1 pin at a time. If this method makes you nervous, you can hand baste instead. When you're done, turn this collar over to the wrong side. You have a great guide. Trim your interfacing, if it's there, out of the seam allowance. Now take your other collar piece and place the 2 collars right side together and pin matching your edges. Make sure to pin on the side that has the stitching guide. And checking that the lace is towards the center, not flipping out and caught when sewing. Keep your cut edges even. From now on, I want you to be aware of the feel. This is important when sewing. You should be able to feel the difference between lace here and no lace here as you are pinning. Take note of this. Use your eyes as well as your hands to place this correctly and as a guide. Sometimes you will feel the mistake even if you don't happen to see it. Pin this complete collar, matching your cut edges, and then we will sew it together. Using the correct color bobbin thread, sew your 2 collar pieces together, sewing 1/8 inch in from your original guide. This was my original guide. This is where I'm sewing. This should be a 5/8 inch seam. But I want you to watch your 1/2 inch guide, not the 5/8 inch marking on your machine, just in case you weren't perfect in your original markings. You shouldn't be off that much to really matter. Sew this from one end to the other. Before going on, turn your collar right side out. Check if you've caught the lace anywhere. If you did, open the seam, fix, and resew. Also check on the upper collar we have it marked. If your original pencil marking is showing anywhere. If it is, re-sew a little more in these spots. Now notice how we don't have to remove our original stitching, which is this black stitching. It's in our seam. Grade your seam allowances like we did in level 2, trimming it in half. And then just a little bit more on the under collar. Remember, we have our upper collar marked, the other side is our under collar. In the seam allowance. This under collar has the same theory as facings. They get trimmed more than the garment seam allowances. Again, when trimming, you don't have to be perfect. Clip your curves like before, all around the curved edge. Like we did on our pockets. Turn this collar out. Use your point turner if necessary to get it out good. And press it well. What a beautiful collar with lace inserted.